Hey everyone, what is going on? I'm Matthew Oliver, and this is Stillwater Alchemy, the podcast, episode 4, Mercury Retrograde. On today's episode, I'm going to be going over some commonly asked questions that I get all the time around Mercury Retrograde specifically. So let's dive in, shall we? Okay, so let's dive straight into this, shall we? So, when it comes to any topic around astrology, of course, there can be many questions no matter what your level of understanding. However, in this common age of social media that we are now a part of, there are many people that will use certain transits like Mercury retrograde specifically to harvest fear, to say certain things, to promote certain things, etc., etc. So being equipped with proper knowledge will always serve you well. So I want this to be an episode that you can come back to, that you can share, that will apply to any Mercury retrograde period. Okay. So the first question that I get all the time, by far the most common, is what if I was born during a Mercury retrograde? What does that mean? Does that mean that I get to go through these periods a lot easier? How can I use a Mercury retrograde period to my advantage if I have this natally in my chart? So, to think of this in a different way to set up context, let's say you were born in a very cold part of the world where it was always cold. You learned how to survive in that cold environment. You learned how to dress properly, how to ensure your car would start, how to hunt for food. And when you go to other parts of the world where that isn't an issue, where you can walk outside wearing whatever you want, and there happens to be a point in this new city that you live in where it gets cold for a couple months and everyone freaks out. They close down the schools, they go into disarray, they don't know what's going on. And you think to yourself, this is not a big deal. Like, I grew up in this harsh terrain. I'll show you how to knit clothes, how to hunt for food. Let me help you move through this period of time because I grew up in this weather. It really isn't that bad. And I'm sure many of you who have grown up in that type of environment can relate if you moved out of your home city and you're like, why are people closing down the schools? It's just an inch of snow. But if you weren't born under those conditions, when you have something that is challenging and that prohibits you from living your normal life, of course, it can seem challenging. So, using that analogy with a natal signature, of course, you are going to move through this period relatively easier compared to those who don't have Mercury retrograde in their natal chart. And this is also something that I've heard about the Vedic tradition of astrology in the sense of if you have a personal planet that's retrograde in your chart, like Mercury, Venus, or Mars, it can be a lifelong journey to further understand the domains and the signatures of that planet, which in turn is going to make you a great advocate and conduit for that planet in your day-to-day life. So let's say you have Mercury natally retrograde in your chart. You may become a master of language, of communication, of commerce and business. You may really take a curiosity in multiple different things. You might become a great author. There's so many things that because perhaps you grew up with certain difficulties or challenges around Mercury's domains, that you then are called to go even further into that element to harvest beauty and gold and offerings to the collective in that way. So, one, if you were born during a Mercury retrograde, then generally it will be easier for you. How you want to use that energy, if you want to help other people, that is beautiful. If it's just a time of the year where you get to breathe a little bit easier and you move through it relatively unscathed, also good. It can also be a time that you can use Mercury's faculties and domains to get ahead. So whether that's moving ahead easier in business, commerce, or your career, if you are able to get a lot of things off of your to-do list in terms of mental productivity, it can also just be a time where your mental health is a lot stronger. So allow this point to be easier in your journey. And if you feel called to use your gifts and your offerings during Mercury retrograde to help the collective, your family, your colleagues, whoever you wish to engage with or not, that is up to you. Number two, during a Mercury retrograde, is this a good time to go back into love or relationships? I have people hitting me up. I have a lot of people that want to get back together. Is this a good idea? Now, as I'm sure many of you understand, astrology is a multi-layered approach. There are multiple different timing techniques astrologers look at, specifically regarding love. In my professional opinion, if we're just looking at a Mercury retrograde period, and would this be a time, a 3.5 week signature where you would really seek out love and make that a main priority? No. For me, that doesn't make any sense. Because when you start a job, when you start a relationship, when you buy a home, all of those origins can act as if it has its own natal chart. So if you start a relationship, that relationship has its own natal chart. Okay. That's why for things like getting married, most people, if they're wise, would consult an astrologer to make sure that the chart of that wedding is conducive for the marriage itself, because there can be multiple charts throughout the journey of a relationship. The chart of when you start that relationship, the chart of when you get married, the chart of when you renew your vows. There's lots of beautiful things we can do with astrology and electing the right chart. But if we're going into a relationship and you're going to have that Mercury retrograde as a signature, not that that's bad in any means, but it means that you are going to be working extremely diligently with your communication, with the topics of Mercury in that relationship. And if that's something that you want to commit yourself to, that's one thing. But generally speaking, it takes the human a significant amount of time just to understand their birth chart period, never mind all the different transits and aspects that can be made in that natal chart throughout the years. So to start already with a retrograde planet, if you could avoid it, in my opinion, would be wise. Number two, if we're going to look at a Mercury retrograde period and pursuing a romantic partner, pursuing love, one thing that I've noticed personally is that if a past lover comes back into my life during a Mercury retrograde, I ask myself, is Mercury transiting my seventh house or my fifth house or in strong aspect to the ruling planet of my seventh or my fifth? The reason why I'm bringing up the seventh and the fifth houses because the seventh house relates to relationships and the fifth house can be romance. And so if Mercury is aspecting those ruling planets or those houses, it would make sense as to why communication is being activated. And we can add one more in terms of Mercury aspecting transit Venus or natal Venus, because of course Venus covers the topics of love. Hey, Venus. Now, just because a past lover comes back in or romantic prospect, during a Mercury retrograde, I would ask yourself, do I feel comfortable communicating? Are my needs and my mercurial domains being met? This is something I see a lot, especially with my air dominant clients, in that the want and the need to communicate isn't necessarily being reciprocated in a relationship. So let's say you're someone that loves to talk to your intimate partner every day, in the morning and at night. And during a Mercury retrograde, if you attract someone, go on a date, it would be a good opportunity for you to state that, to use Mercury in a way. So instead of doing the same thing over and over again, we're going back, circling back to our core needs, our core wants, and expressing this desire on how we wish to connect through a mercurial domain, in this case, communication, so that we're not repeating the same cycle over and over again. How I often see it manifest with clients is that if a past lover comes back, they often see how far they've grown. They're like, oh, in the past, I might self-sabotage, or I might not uphold boundaries, or I might not use my words to advocate my wants and needs. But now I'm in a place to see how far I've grown. If I'm choosing to let this partner back into my life, I'm going to do so in a way that allows me to feel safe. And this notion too of with a Mercury retrograde, it is this idea of going back, of remembering how far we've come. And so if a past lover or a current lover or romantic interest comes into your space during that time, you can see, okay, is this aligned or not? Am I feeling comfortable expressing myself? Or is there an anxiety or fear if I allow myself to shine authentically that's going to backfire? And if there's any fear and anxiety that comes up during a Mercury retrograde in relation to love, then congratulations. This is a perfect time to have those conversations. And this also spills into another facet of this question that if you are in a relationship, whether it's romantic or not, and there is a conversation that needs to be put out on the table, then of course, do so during this Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrogrades are the time to go back, to reflect, to redo something that you have been putting off, that you haven't had the chance to do so. And instead of allowing the fear to win out, allowing you to sharpen the domains of that retrograde planet so that moving forward, you've already gone back and done the retest. You've already passed with flying colors. So at any point in your journey moving forward, when Mercury isn't retrograde, you feel comfortable expressing yourself and knowing that it's going to lead to further love and expansion in everything that you do. And then there's also a common question of, so number three, how can I best use a Mercury retrograde? What can I do? How can I use this to my advantage and use this time wisely? My number one thing during this time would be to slow down. Most humans want to have more time to slow down. Most humans want to take holiday and vacation. Most humans want more time to spend with their loved ones and to do things that they find pleasure in doing. So slow down, prioritize your mental health. If there are things that you have been putting off that you need to do, in essence, tying up loose ends, sending emails, going back to respond to people, going back and rereading or revising or re-editing certain documents, contracts. If you're writing a book, if you have creative projects that are pending, this is a perfect time. And this is also something where I have a client right now who has been thinking about doing something. It wasn't the right time. We've been talking about this back and forth, back and forth. And right now, during a Mercury retrograde, Mercury is also their time lord by annual perfection. We are working on going back to that opportunity to finesse, to refine. And they just recently texted me about something that came through that perfectly aligned with this Mercury retrograde activation, which is just a beautiful sign that any transit, especially retrograde, can bring in beautiful opportunities if you allow it to be. Also, for me, I sleep a lot more during a Mercury retrograde, which allows me to answer this question a different way in the sense of look to where your natal Mercury is in your natal chart. What house is your natal Mercury in? This is a way that you can really look to that part of your chart and answer to your natal Mercury during a Mercury retrograde to refine, reflect, to strengthen that part of you. My natal Mercury is in the 12th house. 12th house, we can find the worlds in between. We can find self-care. You can literally find sleep in the 12th house. So for me, it makes a lot of sense that I sleep a lot more and I really embody that. Also, look at the houses in your natal chart ruled by Virgo and Gemini. This will be true for any retrograde period because Virgo and Gemini are always ruled by Mercury. So during a Mercury retrograde, those parts of your chart are going to be up for review. And I shared this in a Mercury retrograde workshop that I've done, but I have found personally that always, every single time during a Mercury retrograde, whenever I would order Uber Eats, there would be some kind of problem. Like it would take an hour longer, way longer than the projected extended time, to which Uber would just respond, "We're sorry for the inconvenience." Or it would get dropped off on a different floor of the condo that I lived in. Or it would be a completely wrong order. So I'm recording this in August of 2024. So for me, this time during this Mercury retrograde, I'm like, I'm not going to order anything off Uber Eats because I know that every single time there is a problem. And not every single order, but every Mercury retrograde in the past, there's at least been one time where there's been a snafu, which on an astrology level is comedic and funny, but for a human level, when I'm starving, not so funny. And I've never been happier to learn the lessons from past retrograde cycles to implement them now. And that's also something that you can look to yourself, is to note down things that maybe you find irksome or delaying or frustrating and take it beyond just there could be tech problems, there could be past lovers coming in, and knowing what it means for you, for your specific natal chart. Because Gemini rules my sixth house. The sixth house can be about wellness, about physical health. Of course, food and nutrition plays into the sixth house. So I'm like, I'm not going to allow a sixth house topic to cause me frustration. I'm going to be proactive and during a Mercury retrograde to go back and make sure my wellness and my physical health are of the utmost importance, that I make them a priority during a Mercury retrograde to then allow that foundation for that three and a week half period to then bless me for the next 3, 4 months moving forward. And that again is so specific to you and your natal chart that you get to discover. Now, if you are a Virgo or Gemini rising, then this means a Mercury retrograde will impact you that much more distinctly. However, in my opinion, the payoff gets to be that much more great because you get to define who you are as a person, how you express yourself, what you think about, what you want to engage in. So then after Mercury retrograde is over, you may be a completely different person. And that is huge. You get multiple times throughout the year that you get to strengthen your overall frequency. And I mean, we all get to do that all the time, just from a mindset perspective. But from an astrological perspective, this is a unique time that, yes, on one hand, it may be challenging if you are Virgo or Gemini rising specifically. However, the payoff can be that much greater. So those are ways that you can hone in specifically with your Mercury retrograde analysis to make it more personal and thus know how you wish to work with a Mercury retrograde moving forward. Now, this is kind of a number 4, just overarching theme that for those of you that are more intermediate or advanced with your astrology knowledge can think about when we have a Mercury retrograde. So you want to look at which signs Mercury is going to be retrograde in during that time. And then furthermore, you want to look at your own natal chart to see if any of your planets or angles are being aspected by Mercury. So as I'm recording this in August of 2024, Mercury was retrograding in the signs of Virgo and Leo. So if you have prominent placements at the beginning of Virgo or the end of Leo, then you can look at which planet is being aspected in your natal chart by Virgo or by Leo. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you are 1 degree moon in Pisces. And so when Mercury was retrograde in those early degrees of Virgo, then that Mercury was opposing your natal moon. And so that could have been head versus heart, what you know to be true intuitively, but then things that are coming through on a more mercurial sense challenging that. There could have been conversations around motherhood, nurturing, whether you yourself are a mother or you are needing to have maybe challenging, emotionally charged conversations with your mother or grandmother, or even just a maternal or lunar figure in your life. It doesn't have to be a biological parent per se. It can also be in regards to the home and financial matters. So maybe you're wanting to refinance your mortgage or look at different financial opportunities or wanting to invest more money into your home. And this can be a major part of stress or anxiety because this isn't something that's very comfortable for you. But now during this retrograde, you're thinking, I've been putting this off, putting this off, putting this off. And now I need to really sit down and be pragmatic about this and really learn and discuss my options. And in essence, if that signature manifests for you, then you would say to yourself, okay, my natal moon is being in aspect to Mercury retrograde. How am I going to work with this so that I come out of this transit a lot stronger and a lot more informed to keep my emotions regulated and in check? So that is something that as you become more proficient with your knowledge of astrology, you can see, okay, I understand a Mercury retrograde period is coming up. Now, it's an opportunity for me to slow down. I'm going to see where in my chart it is being transited through. And is this something that is going to be really triggering and really activating for me, given a lot of my personal placements are being in aspect to Mercury retrograde? Or is it really not that bad? And I'm just going to look to my natal Virgo and Gemini houses to have opportunities to refurbish, redefine, and strengthen these parts of my life. All right. Now, I also took to the streets of the internet, aka Instagram, to see if there's any other questions that came through. So let me just double check here. A lot of people, in terms of general questions, were asking about themselves, right? So I have my Mercury in this sign, or I'm a this rising. And a lot of the questions I tried to summate, I'm not sure if that's a word. I tried to answer in the previous questions that I had, and it is something that, like anything in life, the more you spend time studying, the more time you take reflecting and embodying a Mercury retrograde or certain astrological transits, they're become easier and easier to understand. There were some questions around there are people attacking me, whether it be at work, in my family, saying negative things about me. Why is this happening? And that also goes to a question that we answer in terms of how can I use Mercury retrograde to my advantage? And if we allow this to be a time where we strengthen our voice and understand what's going on, then it's like, okay, people are saying negative things about me, or people are trying to attack me with words. How am I going to defend myself? How am I going to use this opportunity to express myself, to defend myself, to empower myself, to get the truth? And if we think of attacking, we look to Mars, right? So if Mercury is in hard aspect to Mars, or if we're talking about family, that can be the fourth house or the ruling planet of the IC. So if we see that the ruling planet of the fourth is in hard aspect to Mercury, then we might say, okay, this makes sense. This is a challenging transit. This is going to be an energy that I am invited to engage with so that I get clarity after this period is over, or I am on the path to receive clarity once this transit is over, right? That's the thing that I'll talk to clients about as well, is that sometime during that transit, it's initiating an action. It may not completely resolve it, but you're on the right path and you've taken the proper steps to gain clarity or an answer for yourself. And the final general question was around transportation, around servicing your car, or is it not a good time to get car work done? And this is, again, is one of those things where if you've been putting it off, putting it off, putting off, maybe you're seeing the change oil symbol come up in your car and it's like, I'll do it later, do it later. then yes, it would be wise for you to go and get your car serviced because you've been putting it off. Now this is the right time to do so. I personally, again, wouldn't buy a brand new car during a Mercury retrograde because, again, buying a car, it now has its own natal chart. If you're buying a car, which is very, very mercurial under a Mercury retrograde, then you're going to have potentially delays or having to learn these mercurial lessons over and over again as you buy a car. And for us and ourselves, when we become a teenager, early adult, so 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, that's when we can fully start to understand our chart. We can see our blind spots. We can be more empathetic. But I don't think many of us want to learn how to be empathetic around a car and give it 15, 20 years before we fully understand the ins and outs and maybe know everyone at our local car dealership by first name and who they're married to and what their zodiac signs are after 15 years. Maybe we just want a car that works well the entire time. It's also the same notion of I would never, ever advise a client to get married under a Venus retrograde ever. Like that is just mind blowing to me. So I would never recommend a client to buy a car or a bicycle under a Mercury retrograde. Just doesn't make any sense because also with Mercury, the shadow side can also represent theft, burglars, someone who's using conniving or manipulative words to get their way. So it's also just like I would ensure that if you are owning a car, wanting to work with Mercury retrograde, I would also probably put like cars and travel in the third house. We use our cars to get around in our local environment. That you get insurance, that you maybe put in the garage during a retrograde, not leave it out on the street if you can. These are just things that I would work with. And again, if you've been putting it off getting it serviced, do so. And if you find yourself that your car isn't working, this can just be one of those things where I will work with clients from an internal, external perspective. It's like, okay, your car broke down during a Mercury retrograde. We're not going to scapegoat Mercury retrograde. Instead, where is there a block internally? Where are you being asked to slow down or stop completely? Are you going in the right direction in life? If your car, a physical manifestation of movement, is now broken, what is quote unquote broken internally that is causing a delay? Do you feel like you're coming up to a delay or block at work? Do you feel like there is a delay or a block in your potential? Do you feel like there is a delay or a block in a certain part of your life that is now manifested externally in your car breaking down? What is broken down internally? Because I truly believe everything in our external reality is simply a reflection of what we believe in terms of past belief, past thoughts, past pain, past trauma, past programming. Because for me, this past Mercury retrograde cycle over the past few weeks, and this is also amplified because Mercury is my current Time Lord by annual perfection, the one thing that has come through over and over again is for me to slow down, which I have been doing. I have been sleeping all of the sleep, and I am the self-proclaimed sleep king. And I have been sleeping more than I ever have been and not fighting it, which for me is pretty big because I am very Martian dominant. I always want to go, go, go. And for me to just fully accept and to enjoy the rest, not just rest for the sake of resting, but like, yep, I just need an afternoon nap or I'm going to be sleeping for 8, 9, 10 hours. My body needs the rest. My mind needs the rest. And since I've fully engaged with that, I haven't seen any of the common stereotypical signatures of a Mercury retrograde, which I'm very, very grateful. And as I mentioned earlier, since I have been buying all my own groceries, really changing up my workout routines, I feel like my health has been getting stronger. So it's kind of like this evolution of understanding Mercury retrogrades. At first, it can be fear of broken technology, delayed communication, and then it gets to a point of, okay, where does this fall in my natal chart? To the last point of being, yes, there can still be prominent things happen, especially if Mercury is harshly aspecting certain things in your natal chart. A harsh aspect would be a square, an opposition, and sometimes a conjunction. But even as you go through that, through a square opposition or a conjunction where it can be a bit more challenging, there's still lessons, there's still opportunities to grow, there's still opportunities to be resilient. Even if it doesn't feel good at the time, you're growing so much during those times. Like I said, for me, there's been so many years where I was chastised and criticized for trying to rest or for trying to slow down or just having days where I do nothing, both from a personal and family upbringing, but also from a societal upbringing, right? Where we view doing nothing, quote unquote, as being lazy or not working hard enough or not wanting it enough. Instead of reshifting our mind, Mercury, to believing that it's good for us, it's good for our health. And this is one thing I want to emphasize and just leave you with. If you had the best career, your dream career, a thriving relationship with your ideal family, but your mental health was chaotic, this affected your health, where there are some days you couldn't get out of your head. It may cause gut or skin issues. You may always feel anxious and paranoid that at any moment your job, career, home, health could get away from you. Tell me how that would be beneficial. How would that truly help you or allow you to enjoy everything you've worked for? So instead, if we reverse engineer it and look at a Mercury retrograde as a 3.5 week period that's allowing us to be challenged, that is calling us to slow down. It's just 3.5 weeks to completely dedicate or at least give an offering to Mercury, to bless it, to have a voice, to have technology that makes our life easier, to have modes of transportation that allow us to get to different parts of the world, different parts of our city way faster than walking. I just personally believe that if we implemented more gratitude, if we take certain transits to embody or to give thanks or to give an offering to that planet, to that energy, everything becomes a lot easier. It's just whether or not you want to commit that time. If you want to commit that 5 minutes a day to clean your phone and say thank you for working. If you say thank you to the person that drives the bus when you get out, especially if it's a bus that you take often. Maybe you get them a cup of coffee or give them a gift card and say thank you. Like there's so many ways that you can use transits, but especially retrogrades to your advantage. It's all in how you see it, it's all perspective. But I trust that going over a few of these commonly asked questions will prove to be beneficial and will allow you to reframe how you think and move through future Mercury retrogrades in the next parts of your journey. So that is all I got for today's episode. If there's anything that resonated, please let me know in the comments if you're watching the video version on YouTube. And have a beautiful rest of your day. And I'll talk to you soon. Stay blessed. Bye. Okay, so I get many a question about many different topics. Oh, meh, 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 meh.